just a show of a hand if we're all in favor.
Favor.
Okay, opposed, motion's carried. And the second item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the January 20th meeting. So I look for a motion for approval of those.
One small correction, today is Monday, not Wednesday. The date of the next meeting at the bottom of the minutes says Wednesday, the 20th of April.
Right. Okay, perfect. Well, Heather, I guess you're making note of these minutes?
That's correct.
With that
Okay,
proviso, I'm happy to move them as a true record.
Okay, so moved, and we have a seconder?
Second.
Second, great. Any other errors or omissions to note? So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we have no public hearings today, and we can move right into unfinished business. And under that, it's the Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw Review. Arthur, is there anything changed with that since our last meeting?
Yes, there's a couple changes I'd like to go over with the committee regarding a couple changes to the plan and bylaw. So if I could dive in, can everybody hear me first of all?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Well, just to go over the report, and I think Heather's going to help out with like a shared screen so you'll be able to follow along.
Yep.
Heather, if we could stroll down to where it starts in purple. As the committee knows, this is a tabulation of all the meetings that we had with regards to the Heritage Plan review. And so the new items to be considered would be outlined in blue. The first part just deals with what we decided to do from our January 20th meeting. And again, those are in the minutes. But just to recap, the committee endorsed the concept of proceeding with the proposed district boundaries as envisioned in the approved background study. With regards to the ABCO review, the committee endorsed the concept of providing a notwithstanding clause to enable industrial buildings in the Tannery Road waterfront building area the ability to use metal cladding. And the committee also endorsed the concept of enabling industrial buildings to be permitted to be developed in the Tannery Road waterfront building area without the requirement for a public hearing, provided all other requirements of the bylaw are satisfied. During that meeting, we also discussed comments received from the public through the two public participation programs that we held. One was with regards to railings and posts and fences. And the committee felt that we should endorse the option that they be painted or stained in a solid colored or otherwise left whether in their natural state. And pretty much left that issue up to the applicant. With regards to color, again, at the January 20th meeting, we decided to support the concept of educating the public through the historical color brochures, but not to regulate color per se. Now, one of the major changes that I'd like to go over during this meeting is the review of the proposed Heritage Conservation District plan and bylaw with the proposed comprehensive community plan. I'd like to note to the committee that council did pass a motion to defer further consideration of the Heritage Conservation District plan and bylaw until such time as the draft municipal planning strategy, land use bylaw, and subdivision bylaw are available as part of the Project Lunenburg. That doesn't mean that we as a committee have to stop all our work. I think we can still work out any issues with the Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw and kind of tweak it and improve upon it between now and then. But the next stage for council to actually consider it and actually pass what's called first reading of their intention to adopt will be held off until Project Lunenburg is completed. So we as a committee will continue working with that. One of the issues that came up during Project Lunenburg is what comes first, the heritage plan and bylaw, or is it the community comprehensive community plan and its associated municipal planning strategy, land use bylaw, and subdivision bylaw. So it's pretty much decided to make sure that they all work in unison with one another, so that it'd be best for them to complete the comprehensive community plan. And then we will review that as a committee to make sure that our documents are in line with the community consultation, because they took a very intensive public consultation with regards to the community plan. So I think it's very important that they mesh together. Just to go on, well, in light of that, what I did in this report was a review of Project Lunenburg's discussion paper on built heritage and streetscapes, and the associated what we heard reports is attached in attachment A. And we'll go through that just later on, but we'll start with one of their outcomes talked about Parks Canada standards and guidelines and incorporating those standards in our proposed Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw. It was one of their reoccurring themes. So I outlined standard 11, which is to conserve the heritage value and character defining elements when creating any new additions to an historic place or any related new construction. B, make the new work physical and visually compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place. So I made a note that the Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw attempts to create a balance where additions or new constructions are visually compatible yet distinguishable from the historic place. The existing Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw, as well as the proposed plan and bylaw, follows this notion as is evident in the Canadian Architect article attached in attachment C, and that's with regards to the B2 Brian McKay Lyons project. And so you can see where an existing building was added to with a new construction addition, and it all kind of, in my opinion, meshes together, but you can also see where it was an addition onto an existing heritage building. So that kind of follows the standards and guidelines, specifically standard 11. One of the other elements made a point in the community comprehensive plan development was the issue with regards to modern developments. I feel that modern developments shouldn't go unchecked, so we still have the need for community design to make sure that developments are compatible, subordinate to, and yet distinguishable from the historical place. The proposed bylaw attempts to tighten the existing bylaw to enable better interpretation and enforcement while maintaining set options and flexibility where specifically identified in the plan and bylaw. We could go back to may or should to provide more flexibility in modern development designs, but staff believes there is sufficient flexibility in the proposed bylaw to create compatible yet distinguishable developments. I also attached an attachment B outlining modern new builds and additions that we can further discuss at the end of this report. In keeping with policy 4.81 and part 4.9 of the Heritage Conservation District bylaw, it is recommended that council authorize the HAC to invite the Lunenburg Heritage Society to attend an HAC meeting to receive their comments for council's consideration prior to council holding a public hearing. I provided those sections in attachment G for your consideration and review. I think it's a positive thing to get more input from the public as well as any society or organization. So I'm recommending that we invite them in, and that such a meeting with them should be held after the comprehensive community plan is developed and after staff has an opportunity to redraft the plan and bylaw to make sure that they mesh, and then if there's, and then bring them in for a conversation with regards to the new bylaw. There's no sense, I think, to have them come in now because there might be changes that occur through that review. We also talked about the ABCO and Lot A1 off of Dufferin Street and their proposal to be removed from the architectural control area. Council may be considering this possibility in May of this year. If they are removed, then we as a committee would have to decide whether or not we wish to exclude those from the Heritage Conservation District. Staff feels that as the intent was to incorporate the architectural control areas into the Heritage Conservation District, if they are no longer part of the architectural control areas, then I would feel comfortable with excluding them from the Heritage Conservation District planning bylaw district itself. Again, that would be up to the committee as well as council in the final review of that proposal. But I do wish for the committee members to think about that for future reference. Therefore, all we have to do with regards to this particular memo is whether or not the committee wishes to recommend that council authorize the HAC to invite the Lunenburg Heritage Society for a discussion on the proposed Heritage Conservation District plan and bylaw, and to receive their comments at a future meeting of the HAC prior to council holding a public hearing. And I made a note at the end of the memo, again, that as the draft plan and bylaw is currently on hold due to the pending comprehensive community plan, it is recommended that the invitation to the society wait until the Heritage Conservation District plan and bylaw is reviewed in light of the provisions of the CCP, the Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw. And before the committee actually gets to vote on that, we do have some additions to the plan and bylaw that I would like to have the committee consider. These are really extensions to the concept of including some of Parks Canada standards and guidelines actually within the plan and bylaw. So if I can refer the committee to attachment A, and Heather, if we could go down, there we go. So this is what I'm proposing to add to the plan, a new policy section 3.8 and a new policy 3.8.1 as well as 3.8.2. So 3.8.1 states it shall be the intention of council to promote conservation practices and help protect the heritage value and character defining elements of buildings and settings by encouraging developers to consult with the most recent version of Parks Canada standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada as revised, updated, or amended from time to time. I think that's just a good motherhood statement that shouldn't really impact too much. But it's always a good idea to have them consult and see how their project fits within those guidelines. Policy 3.8.2 states it shall be the intention of council to adopt standard 11 of Parks Canada standards and guidelines by including in the Heritage Conservation District bylaw a provision requiring the review of development proposals for the conservation of the heritage value and character defining elements when any new developments are introduced to the district, and a review to aspire for any new developments to be physically, visually compatible with and subordinate to and distinguishable from the historic place. So there's the indication that the plan has a policy related to the standards and guidelines, in particular standard 11. Now, to implement those policies, we have a proposal for the actual bylaw itself. So in the Heritage Conservation District bylaw, we're proposing to add a bylaw section 3.18. And it's with the heading Compliance with Parks Canada Standards and Guidelines Standard 11, which will go on to state Policy 3.8.2 provides for the adoption of Standard 11 of Parks Canada Standards and Guidelines. New work should be compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place. To this end, development submissions, proposals shall be reviewed for the conservation of heritage value and character defining elements when any new developments are introduced to the district, and shall be reviewed to aspire for any new developments to be physically and visually compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place. In addition, and this is a new concept, to try to allow proposals to come forward where they are clearly distinguishable from the actual historic place. So in the case of an addition onto an existing building, modern design styles and materials not in compliance with Schedule D design guidelines may be used in the transitional space between existing and new for the first 20% of the addition's facade length, which is 1/5 of the addition's facade, 1/5, to distinguish the addition from the existing building. The design guidelines shall continue to apply to the remaining 80% of the addition's facade's length, which is the remaining 4/5 of the addition of the facade. Now that will enable, say, a glassed-in atrium to be added onto a historical building to provide that transitional space between the existing old artifact and the proposed new. So it will be clearly distinguishable from the existing heritage asset. That bylaw provision also goes to state, in addition, the standards and guidelines may be used to assist the heritage officer in determining whether or not proposed alterations or additions are generally consistent with the existing structure and streetscape. So staff is recommending that we proceed with that. I don't think we need any motion currently, but it'd be nice to have a general feeling of the committee with regards to that. That way I can incorporate that into the existing draft of the plan and bylaw, and then have that for approval later on when we get to that stage. Is there any committee members have any issues with that proposal to add to the plan and bylaw?
I think it's a very good idea, not least because it grounds our own local regulations in relation to national regulations. So when people may ask, You know, why is this or that insisted upon? Part of the answer is because we are trying to meet national standards, not just what we feel we want locally.
Anybody else?
I think that's, I think you're on the right track there, Arthur. I think the more we can, as you said, as long as our local guidelines are based, or our local rules are based on national guidelines, I think that helps a lot.
Okay. Well, I'll take that to mean that we're generally in favor of it. I'll put it in the draft of the plan and bylaw, and then we can, as part of that package, which we'll eventually hopefully adopt down the road a few months from now. The comprehensive community plan and the built heritage and streetscape report mentioned that we somehow do not regulate buildings that were built after 1940, but we actually do. We do not limit regulations to pre-1940 buildings. We actually provide regulations with regards to those pre and post 1940 buildings. So I just wanted to make a note of that in the report. Item 3, if we go back to sharing the screen, could we go back to the sharing the screen with the appendix there, Heather?
Yep, just give me 1 second to get it back up.
Sure.
Sorry, Arthur, which section were you looking for? 3?
Just number 3. Yep, that's perfect. So this talks about views. The views were a big issue during the community consultation with the comprehensive community plan. And we just wanted to make a note that unfortunately views outside the district or over bodies of water cannot be regulated or protected under a Heritage Property Act, and therefore cannot be regulated pursuant to the Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw. And I refer people to Article 7, which also talks about this in further detail. And Heather, if we could just scroll down to 7 since we're on that subject. Looking back, I should have put 7 under 3 and put it all together in one place. But basically, it was also outlined in the What We Heard report of uplands with regards to the comprehensive community plan. But we are allowed to regulate settings, but setting means the arrangement of views from public places within the district to places within the district. So it doesn't include views from within the district to an area of land or body or water outside the district. And also, as federally, the body of water in Lunenburg Harbor, the front harbor and the back harbor are under federal jurisdiction. And talking with the province, we don't have the ability to actually include views over those federal bodies of waters through a Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw. It might be able to be regulated through municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, but unfortunately not enabled by a Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw. Item number 4 talks about history, and the plan should be expanded to recognize the Mi'kmaq and the Acadians, and it may include a policy for further discussions with the First Nations to broaden the Lunenburg narrative. However, the Heritage Conservation District Plan focuses on the existing built environment and as such is not the appropriate document to address historical significance related to culture, education, or lifestyles. These are pretty much the intangibles, whereas the tangibles, the actual built heritage, can be regulated through a Heritage Conservation District Plan bylaw. It's more appropriate for the intangibles to be to have policies written up for those in a community comprehensive plan or a heritage cultural strategy. Again, as part of maybe the municipal planning strategy, but as the Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw regulates the existing built environment, the tangibles, we should focus on those. And where the intangibles are very important, they should be addressed in the appropriate policies and bylaw provisions of the town. So I just wanted to make a note of that. If we can go to item 5. There was discussions in the What We Heard report. There was divergence in opinions with regards to control versus no control. As you know, the Old Town Lunenburg is a National Historic Site and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We do have an obligation pursuant to Article 172 of the Operational Guidelines for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention to manage this historical site. I have included Articles 172 to 174 in Attachment D for your review. So Council is acknowledged in those statements as the state party to manage the UNESCO World Heritage Site. The levels of control is under their authority and administration. The implementation of no architectural controls for the site would, in staff's opinion, seriously impact Old Town Lunenburg's ability to remain a World Heritage Site. Therefore, the question really is to what extent, to what level, Council wishes to impose controls to meet their obligations pursuant to the convention. And in staff's opinion, a certain level of control is required. In the What We Heard report, the use of modern materials was discussed. As the committee members realized, we did discuss this throughout the review, and we recommended to maintain the authentic use of wood as the district's cladding materials unless non-combustible cladding is required under the building code. Now, we just talked about trying to make that 20%, the transitional space in between existing and new. So that could be where new materials could be incorporated within the district, but otherwise the historical assets of the district and renovations to them, and the remaining 80% of any facade additions should use the authentic materials, wooden cladding materials. I pretty much outlined that in the report. One issue that I did want to bring up to the committee was when the Heritage Conservation District Plan and bylaw was first adopted back in 2000, they did a background study, and one of the rationales was to, they saw the damage that occurred to the defining elements of the heritage assets throughout the district when vinyl siding was put on buildings. So one of the reasons for implementing controls was due to the apparent need to reverse the damage vinyl siding has done to the historical homes and streetscapes within the district. And that's outlined in the background study that was done for the plan back in 2000. So I also attached that as attachment F. It's always good to revisit those historical documents of how everything was first envisioned and started and initiated as we go through this review of the plan and bylaw. Item 6, it mentions in the What We Heard report the importance of maintaining a tree inventory and a tree maintenance plan. Again, this is in fact part of the Heritage Conservation District plan. So I just cut and paste the sections dealing with trees and vegetation there for your review. Item 7, we already dealt with regards to views. Item 8, and I'll just try to quickly go through these just for the committee. No decisions have to be made in this regard, but it's interesting to note that under the What We Heard report, it was recognized the importance of having a policy regarding fire suppression in the district and the entire town. This is very important. I mean, the town is constructed of combustible wooden materials in close proximity to one another. It is recommended that such a provision be included in the comprehensive community plan as well as the NPS. It does not necessarily have to be in the Heritage Conservation District plan because the plan is just a mechanism to set up policies for implementing the bylaw, which regulates developments in the district itself. Item 9, recognize the importance of climate change threats and like fire suppression is applicable to the entire town. It's certainly recommended that such a provision be part of the comprehensive community plan as well as the NPS, but it doesn't necessarily have to be part of the Heritage Conservation District plan. The What We Heard report also recognized the support for green technologies such as solar panel. We did incorporate sections dealing with solar panels in the bylaw, and we did address some of the other issues with regards to green technology. We certainly wish to support green technologies. We did have a discussion about wind power turbines, which we felt were not appropriate for the district due to the size and the flickering and the noise and the closeness of the small lots and buildings in town. Item 11, again, talks about the history and the culture and the arts. Again, this deals with the intangibles, which would be great to be recognized and incorporated within a heritage cultural strategy, but again, not really appropriate for a Heritage Conservation District plan and bylaw. In the What We Heard report, it also recognized the importance of policies regarding to the historic landscape. The district plan and bylaw, part 2, actually the goal is to conserve the settings so that we have a whole section dealing with the protection of the setting of the district and talk about trees and vegetations and the spaces in between buildings. So the setting is very important, and any substantial alteration to the setting that affects the character defining elements of the districts should be reviewed as part of any development proposal, particularly those requiring a public hearing. So those provisions are incorporated in the Heritage Conservation District plan and bylaw. 13, if you can scroll down, Heather, that'd be great. Thank you. Again, the What We Heard reports from the comprehensive community planning that Upland's doing recognizes the importance of having policies with regards to public amenities, street infrastructure, street lighting, active transportation, etc. These can be incorporated within a comprehensive community plan and a municipal planning strategy. Most of these items are implemented by the municipality. They're in the public realm, and as such are better suited for town policies within the CCP and not regulated by a bylaw such as a heritage conservation bylaw, which regulates private developments on private plots within the district. So just to clarify the differences between those two and our heritage conservation district bylaw. Now, if I may, just to go on to attachment B, I just talked a little bit about a discussion that came out that talked about whether or not we should allow modern developments within the district. If we don't have any design guidelines as part of the Heritage Conservation Plan and bylaw, then I have to question myself, what are we trying to accomplish with the plan and bylaw? And what are we trying to accomplish with regards to the triggers for a public hearing? So I listed the triggers that we currently have for the public hearing processes, and especially highlighted the ones that modern developments would impact. We go down to 4.33, Heather, which is down further and highlighted. Those are the ones that I'm more primarily concerned about if we had no standards or guidelines. I mean, what would council be considering through a public hearing process if we didn't have any design guidelines, if all modern contemporary types of developments were permitted as of right, then there'll be no need to have a public hearing for any new residential building containing more than 2 dwelling units, or any new commercial buildings or new industrial buildings or new institutional buildings. So what I've done for the committee to consider, and staff is not recommending this at a time, but if we wanted to go down that road and we wanted to consider that, modern additions and modern new builds, I did draft a proposed policy. I called it 4.15, 4.16. Again, Heather, we could scroll down to that. So they're there for your review. What I attempted to do was to allow, just to envision how this would work, to allow modern contemporary design additions in the district, provided the work is physically and visually compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the existing structure, and that character defining elements of the existing structure are conserved and maintained with minimum impacts. So that's just a draft of what is feasible. Staff is not recommending that at this time, but it might be worthwhile revisiting as we go forward. I just noted in the same attachment, again, that we have adopted, or we are including proposally, enabling additions to existing buildings to be distinguishable from the historic asset, which enables modern developments to be introduced. And again, I go back to that first 20% of the additions facade. If you can go down again, Heather, a little bit. It's a little bit repetitive, and I apologize for that. A little bit further, Heather, next page. Yeah, that's the new section dealing with that transitional space that we could be using, that follows the standards and guidelines to distinguish new developments from the historic place. We can certainly see how far that goes first before we, what I call, open up Pandora's box any further beyond that. I think that's a nice small step that will be in keeping with the federal Parks Canada standards and guidelines as we go forward. So that's my review. The only decision that we have to make, or could make, and we could postpone it because it's much further down the road, but it'd be nice to get a motion to approve that, so that council can approve a meeting with Heritage Society with regards to reviewing the plan and bylaw just prior to them considering first reading of the plan and bylaw, but that would be after our review of the district plan and bylaw in light of the comprehensive community plan and the proposed municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. So that's my report with regards to the Heritage Conservation District plan and bylaw review. And I leave it up to the committee.
So with regarding having the Heritage Advisory Committee come in, or the Heritage Society come in, would we need permission from council to do that? I mean, we're just consulting them. Is that, I have no issues of putting the ask in, but is it necessary? I guess I ask.
I was talking to staff members and the CAO, and they felt that it would be really beneficial to make sure that council does give their blessing with regards to inviting specifically like an outside organization to come in and meet with the Heritage Advisory Committee. So I like to follow her direction with regards to this, and I was of the mindset that we could actually go out and invite anybody to come and talk.
I kind of thought that as well. I mean, if we have a public presentation from an individual or a group, I mean, we wouldn't need council's permission for that.
Yeah, I think from the other standpoint was we do any substantial changes from the current plan and bylaw, we'll have to go out and have another public participation meeting. And then, of course, any organization or anyone or any corporation that wants to make a presentation to the committee is certainly free to do so. And we value their input, actually. So, but it's more of a wide, it's not a specific invite, if you catch my drift. It's more open to everyone to come and join the discussion, where this is more of a specific request to one organization. So it's just, I guess the CAO just wanted to make sure that we had council's blessing with regards to that.
I would just like to ask one question of Arthur as to what he envisages in this. Are you thinking of the entire membership of the Heritage Society being able to come to this meeting, or are you thinking of a meeting with the board of the Heritage Society? Because there's quite a big difference between the two.
Well, I believe the board would represent its members, hopefully. I kind of envisioned the board coming in and having an open discussion. That's what I envisioned.
In that case, I would suggest that it ought to be clearer in the motion that that's what we're talking about.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you're correct. That should be put in there, that we should add the board. Is the board different than your executive, or the executive?
No, that's the same.
That's the same.
But I mean, the membership is considerably more people.
Yes.
And potentially a rather unmanageable meeting, actually.
Right. So if the committee would like to consider that motion with the board executive of the Lunenburg Heritage Society, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, someone put that motion forward, perhaps?
I'd like to put,
I think we got David, John, and Stephen. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay, any further discussion for that?
Mm.
Yeah,
I
I'll call for the,
Okay,
Go
not
ahead.
on the motion. I just have another general question, but you can go ahead with the motion.
okay, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion's carried. Natalie, what did you?
I guess just kind of reading through this entire thing, and it seems that the timeline is going to be much longer than we had originally intended with this, and we were kind of hoping to have everything passed before the next set of elections. And I'm just putting it out there and just wondering if with that last public meeting, there was a number of people voiced their interest in expanding the heritage district to be continuous along the waterfront, and knowing the concerns over the ABCO properties. But I'm just kind of wondering if this would be a time to go to the province and make those amendments for the plan to expand the proposed district over the original ask. Does that make sense? Do you get my drift? I guess.
I think you're referring to the background study and whether or not we should amend the background study and get that approved with regards to the waterfront going around the harbor.
Yes.
I mean, the
I
argument
think
was
that's
made
something that
by-
we could consider maybe after council's meetings in May, with them approving the motion to exclude those 6 properties that APCO has requested. If that goes through, then, that's certainly going to impact our ability to include the waterfront within the district.
I'm not convinced that it still shouldn't be protected in some form. Yes. Regardless of the next decision at town council, I guess.
Any other input here?
I mean, the argument that was made at our January meeting about not looking at the moment at the expansion of the control district was that to do so could hold up the new bylaw being approved. But if the bylaw is not going to be put forward to council for approval for many months and quite possibly a year, then that argument really is no longer valid. And it would seem to me to make sense to still look at that, and if necessary, commission an updating of the background study to make that possible.
So is it the wishes of the committee to have staff consider amending the background study and present that at the next Heritage Advisory Committee for consideration to forward that off to the province for their review? That might be appropriate if all the members agree.
That's sort of what I've been hearing. That's what that's the consensus I hear. The other thing is as well with the comprehensive community plan, we're hoping things will align with that as well. So, I mean, there is lots of time to, I think we do have the time that's on our side if we do want to make further changes.
I think there is time now, yes.
Yeah.
So do we need a motion for that, Arthur, or is that just by a nod of head consensus? What would you like?
I can certainly go back and take a look at the background study and outline some amendments to it and bring it forward to our next meeting for discussion.
That's good.
Sounds like the plan.
Okay.
All
Sounds
right, good. Okay, so does that conclude everything under unfinished business, Arthur?
That's, yes. I don't have the agenda right in front of me, but
Yeah. But that's
yes.
in that okay, good. So then we would go on to new business, and under new business, we have the Heritage Recognition Awards. And you have a report on that, Arthur?
Yes. Now, if Heather could actually bring up that report and maybe share the screen and we can just go through it. I did a memo up with regards to the Heritage Recognition Awards program. We advertised for nominations from the public on February 5th, and that was the nomination period was period to March 6th. So we had roughly a month to receive public input. Unfortunately, we did not receive any public nominations. Staff has identified 7 projects that staff deems worthy for consideration. They are 2 Kemp Street, 196 Lawrence Street, 80 Creighton Street, 194 Montague Street, 160 Montague Street. Again, it's interesting that let's just had an article in Canadian Architect, and 205 Pellon Street and 12 King Street, which is also up for provincial awards. So there's a couple prominent developments that took place in Lunenburg last year that are worthy for consideration of heritage recognition. I did provide pictures with the before and after for your consideration. I'm ready to just make a recommendation to the committee to recommend that council approves the following nominations for the town's 2020 Heritage Recognition Award ceremony. I do want to note that the town's birthday is usually June 7th, which is a Sunday. We usually push it back to the Friday of June 5th. But due to COVID-19, the town's birthday celebrations might be held off and might be postponed and rescheduled for a later date. So that will give us additional time to get the certificates ready in time. And we should know that proposed date within the month. And whatever date that is, it will be great for the community to be able to get together and celebrate our rich heritage. So that's staff's recommendation, and I don't know if the committee had an opportunity to go through the criteria and rate these projects, or if they had any additional projects they wish to consider. By all means, let me know.
Well, I can say I've been round and looked at all 7 of the buildings, and I'd be very happy to support all 7. I think some are quite exceptionally good. I was particularly struck by 205 Pelham Street, which I think has been quite beautifully restored, a building which had become rather dilapidated over the years. 80 Creighton Street presumably still intends to paint a little bit of unpainted timber below the new steps. But I take it that that's just waiting for the weather to get better. But that's another just beautiful job that's been done there. And of course, 2 Kemp Street is a good illustration of what we were just talking about, of where one may be able to need to use siding or exterior material that isn't actually wood but looks like wood when that's required for the building code. We went through all that some meetings ago, but that seems to me now that it's built to have worked out very well. And I'm also interested, I think 3 of these buildings have now got metal roofs, but they all seem to work.
They all seem to work quite well in my opinion, yeah.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion as well that all 7 buildings are worthy of being recommended. They certainly enhance the look of the town.
So we'd have Oliver as the mover and David John as the seconder then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just a note, Arthur, like when you do the before and after pictures, sometimes like it would be nice if they were almost on the same, view plane. That's like, I find sometimes the before and afters they're complete, like they're not at the same angle or they're not at the same view.
Yeah.
I like to see that, really precise, that I can get a good look at how it's changed.
I'm actually conscious of that, and I try to do that. But there was a couple I noticed that I didn't get the old picture beforehand.
Yeah.
I would have to say of 196 Lawrence Street, it is now done up in a way which makes it really very non-obvious that it was built as recently as 1957. I mean, with that very dark paint, it looks as if it could be a much older building now, which is interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
I think she did a fantastic job.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so any other discussion on that motion then?
No.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, so that should take care of that, Arthur. And then we have the heat pump at 114, 118 Lincoln Street.
Yes, this was an item that was brought up at the last Heritage Advisory Committee, and they wanted me to provide an update. Unfortunately, the applicant did not install the heat pump screen as approved by council on October 22nd and as outlined in his heritage permit issued on October 23rd. I attached the proposal that was originally submitted and pictures of what was erected. I do not believe that it's in keeping with the building or council's intent with regards to their approval back in October 22nd. This building is a registered municipal heritage property, so any utility to the building requires council's approval under its guidelines for alterations to municipal heritage sites. And it's located at a prominent entranceway into Old Town. I recommend that the committee consider recommending that council refuse the 112, 118 Lincoln Street, a registered municipal heritage properties request to amend the heritage permit issued on October 23rd, 2019 for heat pump screen as shown in attachment H and attachment I. For your consideration and input.
So Arthur has a recommendation there. Do we want to move that forward and have a discussion on it?
I think that's an absolutely correct recommendation. The screen as installed is very prominent and very unsightly and absolutely not what was given approval to in the first place.
I totally agree there with Oliver. I drive past and it will be, it's not, doesn't look very pleasing when you come into it's the main drive into town.
So we'll take that as a mover and a seconder.
All right.
Okay.
I must admit, nothing at all looked better than what they have there now, so.
Yes, I mean, I think it was actually better when there was no screen there at all, although I did hang on about the fact he hadn't installed his screen.
Yeah, it was not a very attractive screen at all.
I thought someone had left a pallet up against the wall. That's what I'm like.
Well, I sort of get a sense how this motion is going to go, so I'll call. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. All right, very good. So then the next would be, do we want to set a date for our next meeting, Arthur, or do we want to just kind of go?
Oh, sorry, someone just knocked at the door. Do we not have a,
Don't we already have it already booked in?
I
It
think we
probably
already have
is.
it booked in. I'm just going to try to check that if I can.
Just one question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The Heritage Committee normally meets less frequently than what's indicated on the schedule for May 4th. I'm not sure if that's an error in the calendar or if there was a reason we were meeting as soon as May 4th.
I think we altered it for some reason. I can't remember what it was.
I think it was because of my surgery.
That
That's
may
right.
be so, Arthur. In which
Yeah.
case, just a moment, I'll get the next date from the calendar. Stand by.
And no need to be so formal, Heather.
So
Peter,
the
if I
next
may.
meeting after
go
that is
ahead, Rachel.
July 20th.
Oh, sorry, everyone. I've just been, silently listening to the meeting and feeling a little creepy because I hadn't just said hello. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity while there was a bit of a lull, where I thought there was anyway, to say thanks to Arthur very much for putting all of those the recommendations for Heritage Recognition Awards together. I think it was excellently done, and when we don't get submissions for that kind of thing, it's really helpful to keep the momentum going by having those things acknowledged anyway. And so, it kind of went above and beyond a bit to pull that together. And I just think I just wanted to say thanks, and job well done. So, and thanks to the
Thank
committee
you.
for putting them forward.
Thanks, Rachel.
And yes, Arthur,
you.
you are correct. The standard schedule for the next HAC meeting is July 20th.
Okay, so does that sound reasonable for leave that stand?
Yep, fine with me.
It's
Hopefully
okay.
we'll all be able to get face to face by that time, so.
We hope so.
We hope so.
If anything ever came up, there's always this. So
That's right, yeah. Yeah, if we're still on this platform, we'll try to do it in the afternoon, sort of around the same time frame, and if not, we'll go back to our normal,
Yeah.
our normal time slot. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds good. So then I guess it's just left for adjournment if there's no other business that anyone wants to bring forward.
I'm happy to put it forward.
Okay, so we got a motion to adjourn, a seconder.
All right.
Thank you, Oliver. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried. Thank you all for taking the time out today to get together. It's nice seeing you all.
Okay.
It's not
Thank you.
better than being alone, isn't
Yeah, sure.
it?
I've taken my teeth out and put them in backwards so I can talk to myself.